big release of the year, unless, of course, you count Avatar, which I don't. But
Oh God, no.
that trailer that we saw, that was the first I'd seen like of the actual quote unquote story, and it's like
There is no story.
It doesn't even look like.
It looks like a cartoon or a video game.
Yeah.
And it looks like the story is just like a tour of whatever planet that is.
Right. It doesn't look very different from the first one, really. And then it seems like they kind of gave away all the big plot points in that trailer, although it's 3.5 hours long. So.
And who are they fighting against? I saw Sigourney Weaver's name.
Yeah. Well, it's weird. They brought back a lot of the people that I thought. I don't know. I haven't seen it since I saw it in the theater with Dad 10 years ago, but. I thought Sigourney Weaver's character died, and I know Stephen Lang's character died, but apparently they're doing some weird, like, they come back as robots now, kind of, like, silly plot contrivances.
Oh, boy, because isn't this supposed to be, like, 1,000 years later or something like that?
It's supposed to be, I think, a few years later. I don't know exactly how much later, but it does seem like they're trying to... It seems like they're just remaking that movie.
And doesn't he want to do, like, a whole bunch of sequels, too?
Oh, yeah, they've already shot 3.
I mean, I guess I don't want to be, I know I like plenty of things that people think are terrible, but I just don't get that movie. I didn't get it from the start.
Right.
I haven't really liked anything James Cameron has done since Terminator 2. Like, I didn't like Titanic.
Yeah, Titanic was his kind of big
crossover movie.
Crossover from like genre films to like more mainstream stuff. And now he's done some more like sci-fi stuff, obviously. But I don't know, since then it seems like his ideas haven't been as exciting to me.
Yeah, not to me. So anyway, not too much left in the year. We got to wait for Ant-Man. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We are here to talk about Black Panther Wakanda Forever, which we saw Friday night at the Regal RPX, our local Regal RPX.
And yet we were very happy to see that they repaired the projector.
Yes.
And it's no longer flickering or dim, which was a big problem for me. I don't think you noticed it as much, but I could... we were avoiding that theater for a little while because I kept complaining about the quality of the projector. But they fixed it, so now we can go and see our RPX movies without having to travel to do it somewhere else.
I know, right? Yeah, I won't be sad about driving 50 miles out of the way to get to a good screen. So what's your initial reaction?
I really loved a lot of different elements to it, and by the end it came together for me, but it really felt super slow to me. There were parts that just... And it wasn't that I wasn't like engaged in it, like I was and I was interested, but it just felt like it was about as long as Infinity War. But that movie just goes by so quickly, and this one felt a little bit slower to me. But once everything came together, I think they did a great job portraying the villains and antagonists in this movie, and then the battles were awesome, and then the final kind of confrontation, I thought, really brought everything together for me. So it was really good, and I think just the filmmaking quality and the music and the acting and just the consistency from start to finish makes this one of the more like solid of the Phase 4 movies, more comparable to Phase 3, but I think I'll need to see it again to really determine that pace, if that pacing issue was just like I was in a bad mood or something, or what, but it just dragged a little bit for me, and that is what is kind of making me hesitate. But I thought it was better than the first Black Panther, and probably one of the just overall more solid of this phase of Marvel.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I really enjoyed this movie, and it really hit for me. There were points at which it definitely felt too slow, or they spent more time, I think, than they needed to on certain things, but I was compelled enough by some things that I felt were different than what a Marvel movie typically does. Just, how real the conflict felt, and how kind of like scary and threatening certain elements felt, the way things could have gone one way or the other. There was a little more dread in it, I think, for me of what could happen than, whereas other Marvel movies you feel like, they're going to figure everything out and save the day before everything goes completely to crap. But I really enjoyed it. I think part of it is I went in with very low expectations. Black Panther, the first one, is not one of my favorite Marvel movies. I like it. When I saw it in the theater originally, I didn't care for it at all, and then I've watched it a few more times, and I like it a lot more now, so it's probably like somewhere in the middle for me, but it just felt like, and we've talked about this before, the first Black Panther felt like it was more about Wakanda than it was about the Black Panther. And,
Right.
and we're not the first people to say it. It was like Black Panther and Chadwick felt like a passenger in his own movie. You know what I mean? Like it was not even about him. And there was so much other good Black Panther stuff in the other films that he's in. So I went in with kind of low expectations. It appeared to me from some of the trailers, like a lot of people love the trailers. I was a little skeptical of the trailers. And so maybe I went in with such low expectations, but yeah, it really pulled me along. I really enjoyed it. And I do think it's definitely, in terms of all things considered, production, performances, how the way the story hangs together, definitely acknowledge it drags a little bit in some spots. But I think this is definitely one of the best Phase 4 films.
Yeah, I agree. And I shared that skepticism mainly because I just was not sure how they were going to be able to tell a story without Chadwick Boseman. I loved his portrayal as King T'Challa and Black Panther, and he had such a great presence on screen, and his arc from starting in Civil War, and then obviously, yeah, he was a little bit sidelined in Black Panther, but he still had some great moments, and then that carried through to Infinity War, and then he didn't really get a whole lot of screen time. He was more of a cameo in Endgame than anything else. And so, yeah, I was very skeptical going into this. I kind of figured that they were really going to try hard to make this as good as possible, not only to honor him, but just because they didn't have him to kind of bring everything together. I like that they got his death out of the way at the beginning. Not to sound like insensitive or anything, but like the one problem I had, and I guess we're getting into a little bit of spoilers, but it almost felt like we were jumping from the first Black Panther movie right to the second one, as if there was nothing, like there was no references to the interim of Infinity War, and not that there needed to be when they were at the beginning trying to save T'Challa's life with all the science and technology. It seemed like they were jumping, it had only been like a few months since the last Black Panther movie, when it really had been a long time, because they were referencing like, oh, Killmonger and this, and we don't have the heart-shaped herbs anymore, and they kind of filled in what's been going on with that. Shuri's been trying to make a synthetic one, and to me it almost felt like they jumped right into it, but at the same time they needed to, because like you said, it would have been kind of tiring to drag out T'Challa's kind of funeral and memorial. I like that they did it at the very beginning, and then they had that really poignant Marvel Studios logo that showed all of his different scenes, and then they got right into the story. And even though it dealt with a lot of those ramifications of his passing, it still felt like it carried itself on its own even without that.
Yeah, I was very concerned from some of the trailers and TV ads I saw that it was going to get almost too melodramatic and too many noble speeches about, and tear-jerking scenes. And I thought, yeah, by getting his death over with and done with, and the funeral right away, and then going right to that scene of them on the ship searching for vibranium in the ocean, and that scene, it reminded me a little bit of the ship scene in Winter Soldier.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And also that there was almost like a horror quality to that with the what is the name of that?
The Talokan.
Talokans, yeah. I guess that's the name of, because we scrapped Atlantis for Submariner and Namor, who makes his MCU debut in this film, and now the lore of the Submariner and Namor is now associated with this Mesoamerican culture, which is really cool. How they kind of built that all in. They're this unknown civilization, but when they approached that ship and attack it, basically, it had almost like a horror quality to it.
Yeah, they use the kind of myth of the sirens and the Talokans come up from the water and start singing, and that makes all the crew members start jumping off the boat. Yeah, that was terrifying. And then I just loved the Mesoamerican influence. I think it's a great way to differentiate from the more like brightly colored Power Rangers Atlantis of DC, because DC's Atlantis and Marvel's Atlantis are very similar, and Aquaman and Namor are a little bit, they're different but similar enough that, there's those jokes that people make about talking to fish and stuff, but I think that they really tried to separate him from that element, which I liked. And I loved how they portrayed Talokan as this kind of giant dark city, whereas in the DC Aquaman movies, Atlantis is very bright and blue and lots of colors. So this was like almost a purposefully kind of turn that on its head. So yeah, everything involving the Talokans was awesome, super scary, and I loved getting into their backstory a little bit.
Yep, I love how they brought Okoye back and got her involved, and that obviously becomes very important at the close of the film. But just how Nakia screws up, like, so it was how threatening the Talokans were, and that almost horror element. It was how when they go to Boston to retrieve Riri Williams, and Nakia ends up screwing up and losing the fight, and everyone gets kidnapped, and she goes back, and the queen, you thought for sure she's gonna like forgive her and let her try again, and she just says no.
Yeah, no, she tears
her a new one, and she gets kicked out of the army, and that was like, wow, there were like consequences, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
well, that's something that people say in Marvel movies don't have a lot of time. Is it's kind of just weightless action, and then kind of what you were saying at the beginning, like everything's going to be okay, so it's more just a spectacle. But this was one of the rare later MCU films that, the consequences and stakes seem so much higher based on the power levels of the villains and just the what was happening to the protagonists and everything that they were going through. And so I think that was a definite point for them to focus in on, is try to get that more emotional, intense core that maybe these last movies have been lacking a little bit.
Yeah. And obviously there's consequences for Queen Ramonda. She does, getting into spoilers now, she does not make it through the film, which I thought was surprising. I thought for sure she was going to wake up and it, because I felt like the plot had been weighty enough that I didn't feel like you needed to kill her off, but the fact that they did, again, just raised the stakes of the film that much more, and that leads into Shuri's journey to becoming the new Black Panther, and how she very nearly goes down a bad path. And she almost seems, when she spends time with Namor in wherever their city is under the sea there, how it almost seems like they are going to become, she's going to suck him into her, to his worldview of the surface and all that. And so the fact that she teeters throughout the film before finally kind of taking on the mantle of the Black Panther and like doing the right thing, so to speak. I thought that was, those are the things, like every time the movie could have turned into just like the standard, okay, now we're going to just go save the day or have the big battle. There was always some other element thrown in there. I thought the performances were fantastic. Yeah. Everybody was great. I thought all the performances were good in the first Black Panther as well, but none of them blew me away. But I was like, there was definitely some emotional scenes that got to me looking back on T'Challa, or just the various scenes that happened. Angela Bassett was tremendous.
Yeah, I think she gave the best performance. Like just her, when she was scolding Okoye, and then just her speech at the United Nations at the beginning was really good. Just everything that she was in was very just weighty and dramatic, and she just gave a great performance. Yeah,
everyone was really good. You got the surprise cameo from Michael B. Jordan, reprising his Killmonger in sort of a dream sequence.
Right, well that kind of even furthers that point that you were making about her, which way will Shuri go, because then she takes the synthetic heart-shaped herb and is expecting to go to the ancestral plane and see her mom and T'Challa and everything, but then it's revealed that it's Killmonger that she ends up seeing, which I wonder if that's some sort of effect of it being a synthetic herb as opposed to a real heart-shaped herb. But that was a great cameo, and it further kind of pushed that idea of like, will she end up kind of turning and joining? And they carried that into that final battle, which it's almost like with a lot of the Marvel movies, they finish up that kind of character stuff before the final battle, and that's almost what makes those ending scenes kind of feel a little bit weightless, because all of that character work is already done, whereas in this scene, you don't know until the very end if she's going to spare Namor or not. Right. So it's like they fight, and throughout that entire thing, you're not sure which way she's going to go. So I thought that was very well done.
That was great. I guess Tenoch Huerta, who played Namor, I guess they said introducing, so
I
guess
this was his debut
feature film. I thought his performance was great. He acted very well. He was very menacing and almost like amoral, in sort of a way. This he had his reasons for what he was doing, and he didn't have any sympathy for anybody, either the Wakandans or the surface people. So I thought the way they handled his character was really good. I thought his look, again, I know they were trying to differentiate this from the comic book Namor, but to me, Namor has always had this sort of very regal appearance, and also this almost kind of alien, otherworldly. Sometimes when you look at him, he almost reminds you of the Silver Surfer a little bit. And so, physical appearance wise, Tenoch doesn't have that. So I would have liked to see somebody that had that kind of quality to them. Almost like, the way Ralph Fiennes looks so alien as Voldemort.
Yeah, he did a great job with the version of the character that he was given, and then enough of the portrayal was there from the comics where he is really like an anti-hero, and I don't want to say because he goes back and forth between antagonist and protagonist, but ultimately he's just kind of an asshole. Sometimes he'll just attack people just for the sake of it, or because he feels like they've wronged him or something like that. But what I like that they did here is they made him really vicious and almost cruel, and he kills people and everything else, but that they also gave him a really great backstory that ties into that Mesoamerican aspect that they were going for. I love that they gave him a totally new origin story for his name.
Right.
What was it, like something more, no love?
Right. They fashioned it out of what that Spanish priest said to him.
Which I thought that was really cool, and I loved that whole flashback scene. I mean, a lot of these newer Marvel movies have had these flashback scenes to like ancient times and that sort of thing. Like Eternals did a ton of that, obviously, and I love just being able to see Marvel Studios quality CGI special effects brought to that sort of aspect of the film, which is really cool.
Right. And it's funny, the final battle on the weird looking Wakandan submarine ship, cool. It looked like a giant like oil tanker or something. It has very strange shape. The battle didn't have that typical Marvel spectacle stuff, people flying everywhere and you can hardly keep track of it.
Right, yeah, there wasn't a lot of lasers or energy or anything like that going around. It was just people fighting. But
I think what carried it was the stakes. You really felt like these Talokan people could wipe out the Wakandans, and and then the whole thing with Shuri, not knowing which way she was going to go. And so, while the battle didn't have the visual spectacle that some of the final acts of Marvel did, it had a lot of more weight than some of them do.
Well, yeah, I saw a lot of people saying like, oh, well, this one has great acting and character performances and scenes and that, but the action is a little bit like left a little bit to be desired. But I didn't really feel like that at all. I thought it was all very grounded and weighty, and that was a strange. I saw a couple people make that point, and I mean, I don't think it's as sharp as like some of the action, like the Daredevil show or something like that. But yeah, no, it all felt very. It didn't feel like there was another. Well, sometimes these movies feel like there's another team going off and doing all the action. Stuff just on the side of all the main direction, and that might be what happened with this movie, but it didn't feel quite like
it hung together more. And again, we keep coming back to that weight and stakes thing. And like when the Talokans attacked Wakanda, they were really like trashing people, and it was very threatening. You saw them killing people basically, whereas a lot of the sort of collateral stuff they don't focus on. It's just there. Stuff is blowing up and people are running and screaming, but. Here you really felt that they delivered a blow to Wakanda to send that message that they were trying to send. What about Ironheart and her debut?
Oh yeah, well, I was a little bit interested in how they were going to incorporate her, and I thought it was going to be more of a stretch. So but they actually did. The
way they got her in the movie was very...
Yeah, actually, that's a good point, because she created the kind of vibranium searching invention that the U.S. is using that kind of triggers the whole movie, basically. And so they go off to find her before Namor does, because Namor doesn't want the U.S. to find vibranium, obviously. So, and so they go to... And like I said, it's always great to see Boston in these movies get torn up, because that and Godzilla King of the Monsters was another great recent movie where Boston got completely destroyed, but it's just nice to see. I mean, obviously not nice to see Boston get destroyed, but it's nice to have that representation, because it's usually like New York or LA or something like that, so that's always nice. But it was cool that they brought her in, but then it kind of felt like they didn't quite know what to do with her after that. She just kind of there. But what I did like is seeing her first suit, which was barely even an exosuit. Like you could still see her in it.
Yeah.
And then obviously once she got to Wakanda, she had all the resources that she could do whatever. And then she had that really cool Iron Man style suit at the end. But she didn't have a whole lot to do after that first scene, and it seemed like they kind of just said goodbye after. Like I'm not sure how much.
Right. I almost, when Shuri gave her the car at the end, I thought she was gonna like with Falcon, I thought they were going to give her like this Wakandified.
Oh, right. Well,
Ironheart suit.
They couldn't. Yeah, because she even said that she couldn't take the suit with her. Oh, yeah, that's interesting. So I wonder how that's going to play into her show that's coming out.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I thought she had more of a connection to Tony Stark in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Since her character is a spin on Iron Man. But you made a great point that made it a lot more clear to me. You said she's more someone who, like Miss Marvel, was just a fan of and inspired by Captain Marvel, and it's the sort of same thing. You know, Riri Williams goes to MIT, she like had clearly had some plans for some Stark type stuff.
Yeah.
So it's not really a direct connection. It's just a character inspired sort of by.
Right. Well, and I think in order going into her entire backstory and what she is inspired by, I think that would have just made like the movie was already so long, and that would have taken at least like 5 minutes or more to establish what or exactly why she's making the suit and everything else. Like they did just enough of that for that it was appropriate for the movie, but I have a feeling we'll probably see a lot more of that Tony Stark connection in her show. And then obviously I think she's going to be in Armor Wars too, right?
Oh, probably, I would guess.
So her and Don Cheadle will have that connection.
Yeah, that'll be good.
But yeah, no, overall I thought she was, besides the fact that she kind of didn't have much to do after that, I loved her suit, and there was a lot of mirroring to the first Iron Man too, where she was climbing up higher and higher to try to get to the drone, and then I think in Iron Man it was like freezing, it was the ice, but for her it was oxygen. And then there was that scene where she was just like hammering the suit together and everything. It just looked very.
There were a couple of scenes, not even just directly related to her. I can't put my finger on them. Well, we'll have to see it again. But there were a couple of scenes that felt like they were intentional callbacks to other.
Oh, actually, well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because them going to MIT and trying to get her felt like Tony going to Peter Parker in Civil War.
Right? Yeah. There were a few scenes like that I thought were really nice, and they just sort of hit you almost after it. You're like, oh, wait a minute. Right,
yeah, no, that was a nice mirror, too.
What did you think of the post-credit scene?
Post-credit scene? It's funny, it wasn't
used for what they typically use it for. It was part of this story.
It wasn't, because it was basically, it was just an extension of the final scene.
Right.
It wasn't like it was a time jump or anything, so I guess it could have really been at the end, but the actual end was very good. And then they introduced a new T'Challa, his son, who's very young, so we probably won't see him take up the Black Panther mantle for
a while. He's like now. 10 years old or whenever he was, 5 years old.
Yeah, I think 5, because she said, presumably she was gone for 5 years taking care of him, because they didn't want him involved in all that.
So Queen Ramonda knows, so you probably figure that council knows that he's out there somewhere.
Yeah, no, I thought that was good. I mean, it makes sense that they would want to introduce another T'Challa kind of character, but I don't know. I don't really see. It'll be interesting if I don't. That doesn't really have any immediately.
I don't think it's going to have any immediate impact.
Yeah. And then that was the only post-credit scene. There was no other big tease or anything, which felt appropriate.
And which was it felt appropriate. Well, it was interesting. So where they wanted to finish the movie on this emotional arc. And that was the scene that they used to flash back and actually show Chadwick Boseman, as Shuri sort of thinks back on her moments with him. So that was well done. But it was interesting that it's the first Marvel movie in a while where the post-credit scene isn't teasing something.
Right. Well, in that way, it almost felt a little bit like the older post-credit scenes where they weren't always used to tease something, or they weren't like we were talking about. I think in a previous episode, we were saying how a lot of these newer post-credit scenes are almost like egregiously here's this person, and to the point where it's like Hercules and Love and Thunder, or that Charlize Theron's character.
Right, that was like, huh?
That was just like she just appeared. Whereas in the older like phase 1, 2, 3, sometimes there were big teases or something, but they weren't always like, here's this character, and this one felt a little bit more like that. It was just kind of a add-on extension to the main story as opposed to a big like reveal or something. So I appreciated that.
Yeah, they haven't nailed it the way they did in the early, like, the Winter Soldier, 2 post-credit scenes, the one with Bucky, awesome. And then the one with Hydra, and then Avengers, the one that teases Thanos, and then they're eating shawarma after they finish the battle. Those were great. They haven't done that, but I thought that was really good. So like I said, overall, I want to see it again. I wonder if I see it again, will it feel slower to me now?
Well, that's interesting, because I almost wonder the opposite. I don't know if it might feel faster to me, because now I know a little bit where it's going, so I can kind of track the pacing and story a little bit more. Yes. But yeah, that would be my only big negative, is it just felt a little bit too slow. There was a lot of those kind of more reflective scenes, thinking back about T'Challa's effect on things and how his passing has affected the family, which I understand they totally wanted to make this kind of a memorial film for them, and it was as much for all the actors a kind of a cathartic thing as it was for the characters. But I don't know, it just felt like it moved a little bit too slow for me when I was watching it, and I was just like, it just didn't quite come together as much as I would have liked it. But I'll have to see it again.
Yeah, I think part of it for me, like I said, I did go in with very low expectations. I felt to me, I know a lot of people love the trailers. To me, the trailers seemed a little messy and seemed like we were going to be running all over the place, and which we were. And it seemed like some of the emotional scenes that they teased in the trailers and ads, I was like, oh boy, we're going to get this really like over the top funeral scene with everyone bawling and wailing, and it's going to be super melodramatic. It wasn't like that at all. And like I said, like Angela Bassett, her scenes were just spot on. But but overall, I really enjoyed it. I definitely look forward to watching it again and seeing what my experience is like. But I definitely think this is up there for Phase 4 films. Like we've said, Phase 4 has been, like everyone's saying, Phase 4 has been very clunky again. Like I love Black Widow. I think people forget, because obviously it came where it did, and it was a retro, a look back after her character has left the franchise, and because it was kind of this weird in between movie between Phase 3 and 4, and I think people kind of dismissed it a little too much at the time. But looking back over the Phase 4 movies, I think it's one of the better ones.
Yeah, this would definitely be the most solid one. I don't know if I enjoyed it like right out of the gate as much as some of the other oher
But all things considered, production and
the
performances,
production, the acting, the story, and everything else. Whereas this one felt like it met my expectations, whereas the other ones may have been more entertaining and had cooler like cameos or scenes or whatever else. They all left something they left you wanting something more, feeling like something was a little bit off. In particular, I thought Multiverse of Madness and Thor were the two.
Yeah.
I didn't like Thor, but I did like Multiverse of Madness, but both of those felt a little bit kind of iffy to me in terms of the like they could have fallen apart very easily, I think. So.
Right.
Oh, and that's the other thing, is this one was super serious. Like, as much as it wasn't dour or sad or anything, it was not like over the top parody jokey like Thor was.
It's funny because Thor, I think, finally took lighthearted Marvel to a place where it was like, okay, enough already.
Right. Yeah. No,
like I said, we talked about, that movie almost seemed like a caricature of a Marvel movie, and this was very serious. There was a couple of good jokes, or just like ironic moments that got an audience reaction. We should also talk about how the audience applauded.
This was the first big applause that we had gotten, because we haven't really gotten much of a reaction from the theater in these past few Marvel movies, but this one, obviously, with it being a memorial to Chadwick and just how good it was, I think deserved that applause. So that was nice. And it's funny you brought up humor too. I think we should also mention M'Baku. He actually had a less of a role in this one, in terms of he was more just a character that kind of came in and said some things, whether it was funny. He had a lot of really hilarious moments, but then he also had some of the most
very weighty
poignant,
moments,
weighty moments, especially in his conversation. Like you can tell his character has grown so much since that first one, where he was more of a headstrong, kind of violent and just charged into things. But I loved his arc in the first movie because of that, because you started to see that, and now it seems like they've taken that so much further, and he's still like this awesome warrior badass, but he seems a little bit more contemplative and restrained than he used to, and he worked as kind of a big brother to Shuri, which I thought was awesome.
Yeah, he was awesome. He was excellent. And like I said, everybody was great in this film. So any other last thoughts? I have one more thing I wanted to get you.
Well, yeah, you can say that, and that might inspire some. I think I'm done, but yeah.
What do you think of? I've looked at a little bit of it. What do you think of now? Because I guess the debate is still raging. I thought that when I saw this movie, I thought it was going to end, but there's still that huge recast T'Challa versus what they did in this film. So a lot of people are saying that they should have recast him. They've recast other characters. And it's like, people were like, while obviously the memorial for Chadwick and all that stuff is so important and great, but people are saying, like, was it the right move to let a real life incident bleed into the story in a fictional world?
Well, that's one of the things that I was really skeptical about going into it, is how are they going to deal with his death? Is he gonna die on a mission, or? It seemed like it almost seemed like he was suffering from the same kind of. I don't know exactly what his kind of condition was that Chadwick Boseman died of, but it seemed like they had the heart. They were using the heart-shaped herb to keep it at bay, and then once it was destroyed, that's what caused his death. But yeah, so I was skeptical about how they were going to incorporate that, but I don't know, I think it worked, and yeah, it's hard. I can't really say one way or the other, I think.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I thought the way they handled it was great.
Yeah.
And once you knew that they were going to do that, I was like, I was just sort of resigned to it, but I'm surprised that the debate is still raging. But it is an interesting question of, should a real life incident impact a character and storyline that's fictional?
Right.
You know what I mean? I don't have the answer.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't have the answer either, but I like that they didn't recast him, honestly, because
I think too. To me, I feel I'd say I'd have to land on that side. I think I'm satisfied with what they did.
I mean, yeah, there's probably another world where they did it and it didn't work. Like there was a whole other host of outcomes where it didn't work out very well.
Right.
That they just happened to nail everything. But I guess if he was okay with it and everyone else was okay with it, and they did recast him, I would have had to see what the result was.
There's all sorts of people going back and forth. His family said that he wanted them to.
Well, yeah, at that point, it's just like,
okay,
who cares?
Right, and it just becomes a Twitter war.
Right, yeah, trying to avoid those as much as possible these days. But yeah, no, that's interesting. But yeah, I don't really have anything else. I really think I covered everything. I guess the CGI and special effects here were obviously a big improvement over the first one, because that was one of the big criticisms that the first one get, is just how bad and weak the CGI is, in particular the fight at the end in the big cavern there. But it seemed like, and obviously people have been kind of trashing Marvel CGI lately,
right,
as being kind of too cartoony and everything else. But here it seemed like they really tried to. There were a few shots I thought could have looked a little bit better, but overall it seemed like they tried to improve that and keep that consistent, so I appreciated that. And this
movie overall, not compared to other movies, mainstream movies, but compared to Marvel movies, this was more grounded than a typical Marvel film.
Right. Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, there wasn't a lot of fantasy elements. Yeah, I'll be interested in seeing how Ant-Man and the Wasp turns out, because people are already trashing the CGI in that, which I don't know, it doesn't look great to me, but it doesn't stand out as looking particularly bad either.
Yeah, there was one scene in the trailer where Ant-Man and Cassie are standing together looking out at the quantum realm, and it's almost like you can almost see them like standing on a green screen stage.
Right, yeah. Well, see, to me, there were shots in Black Panther. I thought you could see the green screen was pretty clear. Every movie has that to certain degrees, but to me it's just a matter of how long it's on the screen and how well that translates the story. But it's funny because Marvel has always had some of the best CGI, but it seems like their output has just been so much that it's just impossible for them to coordinate all the different CGI houses, and there's the controversy about how they're being treated and paid and everything else too. So that's a whole can of worms that we won't get into. But I do hope that this marks a turn for the better in the MCU, because we've seen, seems like the general public is a little bit less enthusiastic about Marvel these days, and so I hope they can get back on track.
No, it seems like I know this. I think this movie overall has as of what I'm looking at right now, an 84 on Rotten Tomatoes, which is fantastic, and a 7.5 on IMDb. So, but I am seeing some mixed reactions. Some people, there are people out there that didn't love it. I feel like, like I said, I wonder if it's that. I think people had a lot of high expectations for this movie, and so whenever that happens, I remember going into Age of Ultron just so pumped because Avengers was just so perfect, and I still really like that movie. I mean, a lot of people trash that movie. I really like it.
Yeah, I do too.
But I remember my in theater seeing it the first time movie, because I went in with such high expectations. I was a little let down.
Well, that's probably the weakest of the Avengers movies, and I don't think that was the best they could do with Ultron. Like, it feels like that villain could have been anybody,
right?
Whereas Ultron should have been a little bit more, like, he did have some, and this is getting way off track, but he did have some technologically themed attacks in that movie, but it just felt like he could have done so much more than just lift a giant boulder up off the ground and smash it in. But I won't get too much into that. But
I think expectations have a lot to do with people's initial reactions.
Definitely. Well, actually, it's funny. I was thinking about reactions to movies and things. It seems like the whole spoiler culture and expectation culture has gotten much bigger. You see people complaining about movies before they even come out.
I know.
Yeah. And then, like, when you were seeing, like, I don't know, Star Wars or something, was it there? It seems like that was the movie, and then people went and saw it, and
then they reacted.
You didn't hear this whole back and forth. Oh, it's the worst movie ever. It's the best movie. It was just that was it. And then the other thing that strikes me too is these movies are so secret now that people can come up with whatever they want in their heads.
Right.
Whereas, I don't know, obviously you didn't have the internet back then, but there were magazines and stuff that showed the production. Were things as secret back then?
Well, they were secret. Well, they didn't need to be secret. There was no outlet.
Right.
You didn't have the internet to tease all this stuff and for people to post all this stuff. So you got little. I mean, I had no idea what The Empire Strikes Back was going to be like. I mean, we walked into the theater, you sit down, and we're like, shit, we're on a snow planet. Wow, what the hell's going on?
That's interesting. I would have thought with my kind of direction I was thinking is there was less secrecy about what was happening, so maybe you went into Empire Strikes Back knowing Luke was
you knew nothing, because there was those fan magazines and things like that,
but those weren't really mainstream.
No, they weren't mainstream, and other than that, there was not a lot of what's that stupid gossip show, Hollywood gossip show.
Extra or
there was
Entertainment.
You had Entertainment Tonight and shows like that gave you a little bit, but that was
interesting. Yeah. Well, actually, then I'll revise that statement and say I think it's the constant. It's a fight between the secrecy that the studios are always going for to not spoil anything, and then people being just constantly seeing things like leaked photos or trailers or something that gives them just enough to build this crazy idea of what the movie's going to be in their head. And then that was a problem I had with a lot of the early Marvel movies, is I walked out disappointed from a lot of them because I just thought, oh, well, this one's going to have this cameo and this is going to happen. And then you watch it and that doesn't, and it's still really good, but then there's this kind of inherent disappointment. So I think the Marvel movies have faced an uphill battle when it comes to expectations, especially now, because people are a little bit more critical with these ones. Yeah,
the expectation level for Marvel films, just because of the track record and just the enormous number of them.
Absolutely,
it's hard to ever live up to expectations and definitely not for everybody. But so that's a wrap on Wakanda Forever.
Yeah, I think that's about all I have to say about it. What is next? I guess we're not gonna talk about Avatar.
No, probably not. We're gonna do our Halloween recap in some form or fashion, and cover a lot. And then Wednesday Adam show is coming up. That looks really good.
That looks good. And then I was just thinking, I guess there's a few more episodes of Andor, but I don't think we're going to cover that because we've said pretty much everything. Unless something like
we can just
crazy happens. Yeah, we can recap that quickly.
And then, the Guardians Christmas special. Now, after Werewolf by Night, and after the trailer, now I'm really looking forward to that. So that will be fun. So we'll probably have a grab bag of different things going on, but excited to kind of recap some of the Halloween experience.
Absolutely, yeah, a lot to talk about. A lot of horror stuff going on still, even after Halloween is over. So we'll get back into that. But until next time, I suppose that's about it.
Yep. Thanks everybody for listening. And we'll see you soon.
See you on the next one, guys.